The old pickup truck coughed and wheezed as it made its way down the dusty gravel road. Behind the wheel sat a woman in her late 20s, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. She had been driving for 3 days straight, stopping only for gas and brief moments of sleep in her car. Her name was Maria, and she was running from a life that had become unbearable. The newspaper clipping on her passenger seat was wrinkled and stained with coffee. It was a simple job posting for a ranch cook in Montana. The pay wasn't great, but it promised room and board, and most importantly, it was hundreds of miles away from everything she was trying to escape. As she drove deeper into the valley, the mountains seemed to rise up around her like protective walls. The landscape was breathtaking, with rolling hills covered in golden grass and cattle dotting the fields like small brown dots. For the first time in months, Maria felt like she could breathe a little easier. The ranch house came into view as she rounded a bend. It was bigger than she had expected, a sprawling 2-story building with a wide front porch and weathered wooden siding. Smoke was rising from the chimney, and she could see horses grazing in a nearby pasture. It looked like something from a movie, peaceful and untouched by the chaos of the world she had left behind. Maria parked her truck near the front steps and sat for a moment, trying to calm her nerves. She pulled down the sleeves of her long-sleeved shirt, even though the October air was mild. Old habits die hard, and she had learned to always keep herself covered. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, making sure her concealer was doing its job hiding the fading bruise near her left eye. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her small suitcase from the back seat. Everything she owned in the world fit into one bag and a cardboard box. It wasn't much, but it was better than having nothing at all. The front door opened before she could knock, and Maria had to crane her neck upward to see the man who emerged. He was absolutely massive, standing at least 6 feet 8 inches tall with shoulders that seemed to span the entire doorway. His hands were the size of dinner plates, and his boots looked like they could crush a watermelon without effort. Maria instinctively took a step backward, her heart racing. Every instinct told her to run, to get back in her truck and drive away as fast as possible. Big men meant danger in her world. Big men meant pain and fear and nights spent hiding in locked bathrooms. But something in his eyes stopped her from fleeing. They were kind eyes, gentle and patient. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly soft for such a large man. "You must be Maria," he said, staying in the doorway instead of stepping toward her. "I'm Ben Thompson. Thanks for coming all this way." She nodded, not trusting her voice to work properly. Up close, she could see that despite his intimidating size, there was something almost careful about the way he moved. Like he was aware of how big he was and didn't want to scare anyone. "The kitchen's this way," Ben said, gesturing for her to follow him inside. "I'll show you around and we can talk about the position." The inside of the ranch house was warm and welcoming. The furniture was sturdy and practical, built to last. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, showing generations of the Thompson family. Maria noticed that Ben appeared in the more recent photos, always towering over everyone else, but always smiling. The kitchen was her favorite room immediately. It was spacious with plenty of counter space, a large gas stove, and windows that looked out over the pastures. Sunlight streamed in through gingham curtains, and she could imagine herself cooking here, creating meals that would fill this house with good smells and warmth. "The previous cook retired last month," Ben explained, keeping his distance as he spoke. "Been with the family for 20 years. Big shoes to fill, but I'm hoping you might be interested." Maria finally found her voice. "What exactly would I be cooking for?" "Me, mostly," Ben said with a slight smile. "Sometimes the ranch hands eat. Here, especially during busy seasons. We're talking maybe 8 people at most. 3 meals a day, simple ranch food. Nothing too fancy." She nodded, already mentally planning menus. Cooking was the one thing that had always brought her joy, even in her darkest moments. In the kitchen, she felt in control, capable, useful. "There's a small apartment above the kitchen," Ben continued. "Private entrance, your own bathroom, small living area. The pay is modest, but room and board are included, plus health insurance. Health insurance, Maria almost smiled at that. She hadn't had health insurance in 2 years. Her ex-husband had made sure of that when he convinced her to quit her job at the restaurant in town. "When would you need me to start?" she asked. "Tomorrow, if you're willing," Ben said. "I won't lie to you, it's isolated out here. Nearest town is 30 miles away. Some people find it lonely." Isolated sounded perfect to Maria. Isolated meant safe. Isolated meant no unexpected visitors. "I like quiet places," she said simply. Ben studied her face for a moment, and Maria had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing more than she wanted him to see. But his expression remained kind, concerned rather than suspicious. "The job's yours if you want it," he said. "No need for a formal interview or anything like that. I can tell you know your way around a kitchen." Maria was surprised by how quickly he was willing to hire her. Most employers wanted references, background checks, lengthy interviews. But maybe things were different out here in the middle of nowhere. "I'll take it," she said, the words coming out in a rush before she could second-guess herself. "Good," Ben said, and his smile was genuine. "Let me show you to your room so you can get settled." They walked through the kitchen to a door she hadn't noticed before. It opened onto a narrow staircase that led up to a small but comfortable apartment. The space was clean and simply furnished with a bed, a small couch, a table, and a tiny kitchenette. The bathroom was small but had everything she needed. "I hope it'll do," Ben said from the doorway. He didn't enter the apartment, she noticed. Just stood at the threshold like he was respecting her space. "It's perfect," Maria said, and she meant it. She had lived in much worse places. This felt like a palace compared to the cramped studio apartment she had shared with her ex-husband. "I'll let you get settled then," Ben said. "Dinner's usually around 6. Nothing fancy tonight, just leftovers. Tomorrow you can start fresh." After he left, Maria sat on the bed and looked around her new home. For the first time in years, she was alone and safe. No one knew where she was. No one could hurt her here. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her clothes in the small closet. Everything she owned was long-sleeved or high-necked, chosen carefully to hide the evidence of her past life. At the bottom of her suitcase was a small photo of her mother, the only family picture she had managed to save. As the sun began to set, Maria made her way down to the kitchen to see what she had to work with. The pantry was well stocked with basic ingredients, and the refrigerator was full of fresh vegetables and good meat. She could work with this. She was examining the spice rack when she heard Ben's heavy footsteps on the porch. Immediately, her shoulders tensed and she gripped the counter. Even though she knew he was kind, her body still reacted to the sound of a man's approach with fear. Ben seemed to sense this because he called out before entering, "Maria? Just coming in for dinner." It was such a small gesture, but it meant everything. To her, he was letting her know he was coming instead of just walking in. He was giving her time to prepare herself. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she could start to heal. 3 weeks had passed since Maria started working at the ranch, and she had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Every morning at 5:30, she would make her way down to the kitchen and start preparing breakfast. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee would soon fill the house, and Ben would appear shortly after 6, always calling out a greeting before he entered the kitchen. "Morning, Maria," he would say, his deep voice still soft despite his size. "Smells incredible in here." She had grown used to his presence, though she still tensed slightly when he moved too quickly or made sudden gestures. Ben seemed to notice this and had started moving more deliberately around her, announcing his actions before he did them. "I'm just going to reach for the coffee pot behind you," he would say, or coming around to your left to get to the refrigerator. At first, Maria thought he was treating her like she was fragile or incompetent, but slowly she realized he was just being considerate. He had somehow picked up on her nervousness around sudden movements and was doing his best to help her feel comfortable. The ranch hands would often join them for breakfast before heading out to work. There was old Pete, who had been working cattle for 40 years and told the same stories every morning. There was young Tommy, barely 20, who ate like he hadn't seen food in weeks. And there was Carlos, the quiet one who always thanked her. In Spanish, before leaving for the day, Maria enjoyed cooking for them. They were appreciative of her efforts and never complained about anything she prepared. But she noticed that they were careful around her too. Just like Ben, they didn't crowd her space, didn't make sudden loud noises, and always said please and thank you. She wondered if Ben had said something to them about being respectful, or if they had simply picked up on her skittish behavior on their own. One morning, while she was lifting a heavy cast-iron skillet full of scrambled eggs, she winced and nearly dropped it. The movement pulled at her ribs, where a particularly bad bruise was still healing. She had thought no one noticed, but when she looked up, Ben was watching her with concern. "You okay there?" he asked gently. "Just fine," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Heavy pan, that's all." Ben didn't look convinced, but he didn't push the issue. Instead, he quietly moved the heaviest pots and pans to lower shelves where she could reach them more easily. The next day, she found a smaller, lighter skillet on the counter with a note that said, "Thought this might be easier to handle." It was such a small gesture, but it made her eyes water. She couldn't remember the last time someone had noticed she was struggling and tried to make things easier for her instead of harder. As the weeks went on, Ben continued to notice things. He saw how she favored her left side when she walked. He noticed that she always wore long sleeves, even when the kitchen got warm from cooking. He saw how she would flinch if someone approached her from behind, and how she always positioned herself near the back door, as if she needed to know she had an escape route. One evening after dinner, Ben was helping her clean up the kitchen. This had become their routine. She would cook, and he would help with the dishes and cleaning. As they worked side by side, Maria rolled up her sleeves to wash the pots and pans. Ben was drying a plate when he glanced over and saw her arms, his hands stilled on the dish towel. Her forearms were covered in bruises, some old and yellow, others newer and still purple. They were clearly finger-shaped marks, as if someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave permanent impressions. Maria noticed him staring and quickly pulled her sleeves back down, her face flushing with embarrassment. "Sorry," she mumbled, not meeting his eyes. "You don't have anything to apologize for," Ben said quietly, his voice filled with something that sounded like controlled anger. But she could tell the anger wasn't directed at her. They finished cleaning in silence, but Maria could feel Ben's eyes on her throughout the rest of the evening. She excused herself early and retreated to her small apartment, feeling exposed and vulnerable. The next morning, Ben was gentler than usual, if that was even possible. He brought her coffee without being asked and helped set up the breakfast. Ingredients without saying a word about what he had seen, but Maria could tell that something had changed. There was a protective quality to the way he hovered nearby while she cooked, never crowding her but always within earshot. When the ranch hands came in for breakfast, Ben made sure he was positioned between them and Maria, not in an obvious way, but she noticed, over the next few days, Ben started asking casual questions about her past. Where had she learned to cook so well? Did she have family? Had she always lived in this part of the country? Maria answered vaguely, giving short responses that didn't reveal much. She had learned to be careful about sharing personal information. Too many details could be dangerous if the wrong person came looking for her, but Ben was patient. He didn't push when she deflected his questions. Instead, he shared stories about his own life, how he had inherited the ranch from his grandfather, how he had always been too big for his own good, how he had learned to be gentle with animals because his size frightened them. "Had a horse?" "Once," he told her one evening as they sat on the front porch after dinner. "Beautiful mare, but she'd been mistreated before I got her. Took months before she'd let me get close without flinching. Had to learn to move slow, speak soft, never make sudden movements." Maria understood he wasn't really talking about the horse. One night she woke up screaming from a nightmare. In her dream, her ex-husband had found her at the ranch and was dragging her back to the truck. She woke up thrashing and crying, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. A few minutes later, there was a gentle knock on her door. "Maria? You okay in there?" Ben's voice was muffled through the door, but she could hear the concern. "I'm fine," she called back, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I'm going to leave some hot tea outside your door," Ben said. "Chamomile, my grandmother used to make it for bad dreams." She heard his heavy footsteps retreating down the stairs. When she opened her door a few minutes later, there was indeed a steaming mug of tea waiting for her, along with a small plate of cookies and a note that said, "You're safe here." Maria took the tea back to bed and sat sipping it while looking out her small window at the star-filled sky. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she allowed herself to believe that maybe Ben's note was true. Maybe she really was safe here. The next morning, Ben didn't mention the incident, but he was extra attentive, making sure she had everything she needed and asking if she wanted help with any of the heavier tasks. As she cooked breakfast, Maria found herself watching Ben interact with the ranch hands. He was firm but fair with them, never raising his voice even when they made mistakes. When young Tommy accidentally knocked over a full coffee pot, shattering it on the kitchen floor, Ben just shrugged and said, "Accidents happen. Let's clean it up." She contrasted this with her memories of her ex-husband, who would fly into a rage over much smaller infractions. Ben's calm, steady presence was like a balm to her frayed nerves, but despite the growing sense of safety, Maria remained guarded. She had learned the hard way that kind behavior could change without warning. She had been fooled before by someone who seemed gentle and caring, only to discover that the kindness was just a mask hiding something much darker underneath. Still, as the days passed, she found herself looking forward to their evening conversations and the quiet moments they shared while cleaning the kitchen together. For the first time in years, she was beginning to remember what it felt like to not be afraid all the time. It was a Tuesday morning in late November when Maria's world almost came crashing down. She had been at the ranch for 6 weeks and had finally started to feel something she hadn't experienced in years: peace. The nightmares were becoming less frequent, and she had even started humming while she cooked. Something Ben had mentioned made the whole house feel more alive. She was in the middle of preparing lunch, kneading dough for fresh bread, when she heard the sound of tires on gravel outside. This wasn't unusual. Deliveries came to the ranch regularly, and sometimes neighbors would stop by. But something about the aggressive way this vehicle pulled up to the house made her stomach clench with dread. Through the kitchen window, she saw a red pickup truck that looked all too familiar. Her hands froze on the dough as a man stepped out of the driver's seat. He was of average height with dark hair and an angry expression that she knew too well. It was David, her ex-husband, and he looked furious. Maria's legs nearly gave out beneath her. She gripped the counter so hard her knuckles turned white, flour forgotten as panic washed over her like a cold wave. How had he found her? She had been so careful, paying only in cash, avoiding using her real name anywhere she could. She had thought she was finally free. David was already stomping toward the front door, his fists clenched at his sides. Maria recognized that walk, that expression. It meant trouble. It meant pain. It meant she was about to pay for the crime of trying to escape. "Ben?" she whispered, but her voice came out as barely a breath. She tried again, louder this time. "Ben!" Heavy footsteps came from the direction of the office, and Ben appeared in the kitchen doorway. One look at Maria's terrified face told him something was very wrong. "What is it?" he asked, moving toward her with concern. Before she could answer, someone started pounding on the front door with enough force to shake the house. David's voice came through the wood, loud and demanding. "I know she's in there." "Maria, get out!" "Here right now." Maria's whole body started shaking. She backed away from the window, pressing herself against the far wall as if she could disappear into it. "Please," she whispered to Ben, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. "Please don't. Let him see me. Please don't tell him I'm here." Ben's expression darkened as he understood what was happening. His jaw tightened, and for the first time since Maria had known him, he looked truly intimidating. All that gentleness was still there, but underneath it was something steel-hard and protective. "Stay here," he told her quietly. "I'll handle this." The Pounding on the door continued, accompanied by David's increasingly angry shouts. I know you're hiding her, that's my wife in there. Ben walked to the front door with measured steps. Maria could hear him turn the lock and open it, though she couldn't see what was happening from where she was hiding in the kitchen. Can I help you? Ben's voice was calm but cold. Where is she? David's voice was closer now, and Maria could picture him trying to push past Ben into the house. Where's Maria? I know she's here. Her piece of junk truck is parked right there. I'm going to need you to step back, Ben said, his voice carrying a warning that even David seemed to hear. Listen, big guy, I don't want any trouble with you. I just want my wife back. She took off with some of my stuff and I need to talk to her. Maria pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle a sob. David was lying, of course. She hadn't taken anything except the clothes on her back and the small amount of money she had hidden away from her part-time cleaning jobs. But David had always been good at making himself sound like the victim. There's no one here by that name, Ben said firmly. And I'm going to need you to leave my property. Come on, man. Her truck is right there. I've been looking for her for weeks. Just let me talk to her for 5 minutes. The truck belongs to my cook, Ben said. And she's not available. You need to leave, now. Maria could hear the anger building in David's voice. She knew that tone well. It was the same one he used right before he would grab her arm hard enough to leave bruises or shove her against a wall. Look, I don't know what sob story she told you, but Maria is my wife. We had a little fight, and she ran off like she always does when things get tough. But we work things out? We always work things out? I said leave. Ben's voice had dropped to a dangerous low rumble. You can't keep her from me. David's voice cracked with frustration. She's my wife. I have rights. That's when Maria heard something that made her blood run cold, the sound of David's hand hitting something. In her mind, she could picture him shoving Ben, trying to push past him into the house. It was exactly the kind of thing David would do when he wasn't getting his way, but instead of the sound of Ben stumbling backward, there was just silence. Then David's voice again, but higher pitched now, nervous. Hey, let go of me. You just made a mistake, Ben said, his voice deadly quiet. You're on my property, harassing my employee, and now you've put your hands on me. I suggest you get back in your truck and drive away before I call the sheriff. This isn't over, David said, but Maria could hear the fear in his voice now. I'll be back with the police if I have to. You can't hide her forever. If you come back to my property, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. If you contact my employee again, I'll have you arrested for harassment. Do I make myself clear? Maria heard the sound of truck doors slamming and tires spinning on gravel as David drove away much faster than he had arrived, but she couldn't stop shaking. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the kitchen floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. Ben appeared in the kitchen doorway a moment later. His face was flushed with anger, but when he saw Maria huddled on the floor, his expression immediately softened. He's gone, Ben said gently, keeping his distance so he wouldn't frighten her further. He's gone, and he's not coming back. You don't understand, Maria said through her tears. He'll never stop. He'll come back with police, or he'll wait until you're not here, or he'll find some other way. He always finds a way. Ben crouched down so he was at her eye level, but stayed several feet away. Maria, he said quietly, I need you to tell me what's really going on. Who is he to you? My ex-husband, she whispered. I left him 2 months ago. I thought I was far enough away. I thought he'd give up looking. Why did you leave? Maria looked up at Ben's kind face and saw only concern there, no judgment. For the first time since David had appeared, she felt like she could breathe again. Because he hurt me, she said simply. Every day for 2 years, and I finally got scared enough to run. Ben's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained gentle. You did the right thing. Running took courage. He'll come back, Maria repeated. He always comes back. And he'll keep coming until he gets what he wants. Then we'll be ready for him, Ben said firmly. You're not alone anymore, Maria. You're not facing this by yourself. For the first time since David's truck had pulled up outside, Maria felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe Ben was right. Maybe this time would be different. The day after David's visit, Ben made a decision that changed everything. He knocked gently on Maria's apartment door early in the morning before she had come down to start breakfast. "Maria, I'd like to talk to you about something important." When she opened the door, her eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. She had spent most of the night staring out her window, jumping at every sound, expecting to see David's red truck coming back up the driveway. "I've been thinking," Ben said carefully, "and I don't think it's safe for you to be staying up here alone. What if he comes back when I'm out working the far pastures? What if he tries to get in through that outside entrance?" Maria hadn't thought of that, but now the fear crept back in. Her little apartment had felt like a safe haven, but now she realized how vulnerable she was up there. "I want you to move into the main house," Ben continued. "There's a guest room on the ground floor, right next to the kitchen. It has a good strong lock, and you'd be close to the phone and the main exits." "I don't want to be a burden," Maria said quietly. "You're not a burden," Ben replied firmly. "You're someone who needs help, and I'm someone who can help. That's not a burden, that's just being human." That afternoon, Ben helped her move her few belongings into the guest room. It was larger than her apartment, with a comfortable bed, a reading chair by the window, and its own small bathroom. But the best part was that it connected directly to the kitchen through a door that could be locked from her side. "This way, you can come and go as you please," Ben explained. "And if you ever feel unsafe, you can lock that door and you'll have your own space." The next change Ben made was to the ranch's phone system. He showed Maria how to use the radio that connected to all the workers out in the fields. "If anything happens, you press this button and say emergency, every person on this ranch will hear you, and they'll all come running." He also gave her a cell phone, something she hadn't owned in over 2 years. David had taken her old phone and never let her get a new one. "It's programmed with my number, the sheriff's office, and my neighbor Tom's house. He's retired military, and he's only 5 minutes away." But the most important change was in Ben himself. He became hyper-aware of Maria's safety without making her feel trapped. When he had to leave the ranch for supplies or business, he would tell her exactly where he was going and when he expected to be back. "I'm heading into town for feed," he would say. "Should be back by 3. Tom knows I'm gone, and he'll be keeping an eye on the place." Maria was touched by these precautions, but she was also worried about the changes she was seeing in Ben. The easygoing rancher had become more serious, more watchful. She often caught him staring out the windows or checking the locks on the doors. One evening, about a week after David's visit, Maria was cleaning up after dinner when she noticed Ben examining a cut on his hand from a piece of barbed wire. It wasn't deep, but it was bleeding steadily. "Let me look at that," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Ben started to wave her off. "It's nothing, just a scratch." But Maria was already getting the first aid kit from the kitchen cabinet. "Sit down," she said, pointing to one of the kitchen chairs. For the first time since she'd known him, Ben did what she told him to do without arguing. Maria cleaned the cut gently with antiseptic and wrapped it carefully with gauze. "You don't have to take care of me," Ben said softly as she worked. "I'm supposed to be taking care of you." "Maybe we can take care of each other," Maria replied, not looking up from his hand. It was such a simple moment, but something shifted between them. Maria realized that she had been so focused on her own fear and healing that she hadn't noticed Ben's loneliness. This big, gentle man lived alone on this huge ranch, taking care of everyone else, but never letting anyone take care of him. Their evening routine began to change. Instead of Maria disappearing to her room right after dinner, she started staying in the kitchen while Ben did paperwork at the table. They didn't always talk, but the comfortable silence between them was healing for both of them. Sometimes Ben would tell her stories about the ranch, about his grandfather who had built it, about the animals he'd raised over the years. His favorite story was about a calf he'd bottle-fed as a child, who had grown up thinking Ben was his mother and would follow him around the barnyard like a huge, clumsy puppy. "My grandfather used to say that animals know who they can trust," Ben told her one evening. They can sense kindness from a mile away, but they can also smell fear and anger just as easily. Maria thought about this as she watched Ben with the ranch animals. The horses would come to the fence when they saw him approaching. The barn cats would wind around his legs, purring. Even the most skittish cattle would calm down when Ben was nearby. "I think people are the same way," she said one night as they sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. "We can sense when someone means us harm, even when they're trying to hide it. And we can sense when someone wants to protect us," Ben added quietly. Maria looked over at him. This gentle giant who had turned his whole life upside down to keep her safe. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked. "You barely know me." Ben was quiet for a long moment, watching a hawk circle high above the pasture. "My mother was hurt by someone once," he said finally, "before she met my father. She never talked about it much, but I could see it in her sometimes. The way she would flinch at sudden movements, the way she would check the locks twice before bed." He turned to look at Maria, his eyes serious. "She used to tell me that the most important thing a man could do was make the people around him feel safe. Not just women, but everyone. She said that being big meant I had a responsibility to be gentle." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Maria said. She died when I was 25, but I still hear her voice sometimes telling me to be the kind of man who makes the world a little bit safer." That night, for the first time since David's visit, Maria slept peacefully. She dreamed not of her ex-husband's angry face, but of warm kitchens and gentle voices and the feeling of being truly protected. The next morning, she woke up humming again. Ben smiled when he heard it, and Maria realized that somewhere along the way, his happiness had become important to her too. 3 days later, David came back. But this time, Maria wasn't alone, and this time, she was ready for him. She heard the truck coming up the drive and immediately pressed the emergency button on the radio. Within minutes, Ben was there, along with 3 ranch hands and Tom from the neighboring ranch. David took one look at the group of determined men standing between him and the house and decided he didn't want that fight after all. He left without even getting out of his truck. "He's not coming back," Ben said confidently as they watched the red pickup disappear down the road. And for the first time since she'd left her old life behind, Maria believed that might actually be true. Winter melted into spring at the ranch, and with it came changes that neither Maria nor Ben had expected. The fear that had gripped Maria for months was slowly being replaced by something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. And Ben, who had spent years living a quiet, solitary life, found himself looking forward to each day in a way he hadn't since he was a child. It started with small things. Maria began leaving her room door open during the day, no longer feeling the need to hide behind locked doors. She started humming not just while cooking, but while doing laundry, while reading in the evening, while tending to the small herb garden she had started behind the kitchen. Ben noticed every change. The way she smiled more easily now. The way she no longer jumped when he entered a room. The way she had started teasing him gently about his enormous appetite and his habit of leaving muddy boots by the back door. "You know," she said one morning, as she served him a stack of pancakes that could have fed 3 people, "most people don't need this much food to survive. Most people don't spend 12 hours a day wrestling cattle," Ben replied with a grin. "Besides, your cooking is too good to eat in small portions." These playful exchanges had become a regular part of their morning routine. Maria would cook, Ben would eat and compliment her food, and they would chat about the day ahead or share stories from their past. It felt natural, comfortable, like they had been doing it for years instead of months, but it was the quiet moments that revealed how much their relationship had deepened. The way Ben would read his farming magazines at the kitchen table while Maria cooked dinner, both of them content in each other's company. The way Maria would save Ben the last piece of pie, knowing it was his favorite. The way they had started sitting closer together on the front porch in the evenings, their conversations growing longer and more personal. One evening in early May, they were sitting outside watching the sunset when Maria asked Ben about something that had been on her mind for weeks. "Why haven't you ever married?" she asked gently. I mean, you're kind, you're successful, you're... She paused, blushing slightly. You're a good man. I would think women would be lining up. Ben laughed, but there was something sad in it. Hard to find someone who isn't intimidated by all this, he said, gesturing to his large frame. Most women take one look at me and assume I'm some kind of brute, and the ones who aren't scared usually want to change me somehow, make me smaller, quieter, more refined. That's their loss, Maria said firmly. Anyone who can't see past your size to the person you really are doesn't deserve you. Ben looked at her with surprise. In all his years, no one had ever defended him quite so fiercely. What about you? He asked softly. Do you ever think about trying again? After everything that happened? Maria was quiet for a long moment, watching. A hawk circled lazily overhead. I used to think I was broken, she said finally. Like maybe I was the kind of person who would always choose the wrong man, always end up getting hurt. But being here with you... She trailed off, not sure how to finish, but being here with me, what? Ben prompted gently. Being here with you has taught me what kindness actually looks like, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You've, shown me that not all men are angry, not all men want to control and hurt. You've been patient with my fears, gentle with my healing. You've made me remember who I used to be before I forgot how to be happy. They sat in comfortable silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts. But something had shifted between them. Some invisible barrier had been crossed. The change became evident a few days later when Maria was in the barn helping Ben with a sick calf. The little animal was weak and wouldn't take a bottle, and Ben was getting frustrated. Come on, little guy, he murmured, trying to coax the calf to drink. You need to eat something. Here, let me try, Maria said, taking the bottle from Ben's enormous hands. She knelt down in the straw and spoke softly to the calf, her voice soothing and patient. After a few minutes, the little animal began to drink. How did you do that? Ben asked, amazed. Sometimes the gentlest approach works best, Maria said, smiling up at him. You taught me that. Ben knelt down beside her in the straw, and suddenly they were very close. Maria could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, could smell the clean scent of soap and sunshine that always seemed to cling to him. Maria, he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. Yes? I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. If you want me to stop talking, just say so. Maria's heart began to race, but not with fear this time. With anticipation. I'm listening, she said. I love you, Ben said simply. Not as someone I'm protecting, not as someone I feel sorry for. I love you as a woman, as a person, as someone I can't imagine my life without anymore. Maria felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were good tears this time. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have for weeks, but I was too scared to admit it, even to myself. Ben reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and cupped her face gently in his large hands. I would never hurt you, he said. I would die before I hurt you. I know, Maria said, leaning into his touch. That's why I love you. Their first kiss was soft and careful, full of tenderness and promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying a little. The wedding took place on a warm Saturday in September, almost exactly 1 year after Maria had first arrived at the ranch. It was a small ceremony held in the front yard with just the ranch hands, some neighbors, and the local minister in attendance. Maria wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Ben wore his best suit, which he had to have specially tailored because of his size. Tom walked Maria down the makeshift aisle since she had no family, and old Pete played the guitar while she and Ben exchanged vows. I promise to keep you safe, Ben said during his vows, his voice thick with emotion. But more than that, I promise to help you remember every day how strong and brave and beautiful you are. I promise to love your gentle heart, Maria replied, her voice steady and sure, and to never take for granted the gift you've given me, the gift of feeling safe enough to love again. After the ceremony, there was dancing in the barn and cake that Maria had made herself. a towering chocolate creation that took Ben 3 pieces to finish. As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, Ben and Maria stood on their front porch, Maria's small hand clasped in Ben's enormous one. "No regrets?" Ben asked, looking down at his new wife. "Only one," Maria said, smiling up at him. "What's that?" "I wish I had been brave enough to leave sooner, so I could have found you sooner." Ben pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against his chest, how right it felt to hold her. "We found each other when we were supposed to," he said. "And that's all that matters." As they stood there under the Montana stars, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of their ranch, both of them knew that they had found something precious. Not just love, but the kind of love that heals, that protects, that makes two broken people whole.